Really delighted to have Geshe Graham with us. He's actually in France, and I'm in the UK, so it'd be interesting for you to tell us if you're anywhere else in the world. It'd be really lovely to know where people are. Just put that in the Q&A and we'll make a note of that. But it is lovely that you're with us, Geshe Graham, and we feel hugely privileged to have you with us. And I guess one of the advantages now of doing online teachings is that you can be with us even though you're in France. We're hugely grateful to you for launching the Lamrim Buddhist Centre Wales teaching programme. And it's particularly poignant to have Geshe Graham with us launching our programme because Geshe Graham trained at the same monastery as our dear Geshe Damcho, who was our spiritual teacher at Lamrim for 40 odd years and left us in 2017. But to have that link between the two Geshes is wonderful, and so it feels particularly lovely and right that we've got Geshe Graham launching our teachings with that shared background. And Geshe Graham visited Lamrim on a number of occasions, so obviously met Geshe Damcho and spent time with him there. And Geshe Graham only said to me the other day how lovely it is, what a wonderful place that Lamrim Buddhist Centre in Wales is. Furthermore, Geshe Graham is one of only 5 Westerners to have actually attained the Geshe degree, and he was ordained by His Holiness the Dalai Lama in 1991. So again, as I said, it's so wonderful to have you with us, and we're very grateful. I won't say too much more, but I would just like to mention Jason. Jason is a student of Geshe Graham's, has been a student of Geshe Graham's for over 10 years. And Jason has very kindly offered to take the questions and to monitor the chat for us through the Q&A. So thank you, Jason, for doing that. So I'm going to leave your screens now, and I'm just going to hand over to Geshe Graham, if that's okay. All right, thank you. Thank you for being with us. I'll see you at the very end. Thank you.
Let me start with a quick prayer. Welcome, everybody. To Buddha, Dharma, and find fellowship. I go for refuge till enlightenment. By my collections, giving, and so forth. May I reach Buddhahood for all being's sake. To Buddha, Dharma, and find fellowship. I go for refuge till enlightenment. By my collections, giving, and so forth. May I reach Buddhahood for all being's sake. To Buddha, Dharma, and find fellowship. I go for refuge till enlightenment. By my collections, giving, and so forth. May I reach Buddhahood for all being's sake. Good evening again. I'm very pleased to be part of Lamrim Wales' efforts to get the Buddha Dharma flourishing in that part of the world again, especially the Buddhism in the Dalai Lama traditions, I call it. But of course, a Dharma centre like Lamrim Wales can be a place of diverse teaching. So I look forward to that thriving again soon. I'm also very grateful to Nalanda Monastery for the use of their sort of international broadcasting facilities, shall we say. Nalanda Monastery in the deep south of France, very, very sunny, not far from Toulouse. So that's where I'm based at the moment, in a place in the Dalai Lama tradition where we can say, yeah, the teachings of Tibetan Buddhism are flourishing a bit. So that's really fantastic. We have a small live audience of about 6 people. I've no idea who I'm talking to, behind the screen. There are probably some of my friends there, so hi, but I've no idea who they are. So we'll just see how we get on. Look forward to your questions if you have any. According to the little subtitle there's 42 people online now. Great. Welcome all of you. So let's not beat about the bush. So where are we? Where do we find ourselves? We're kind of washed up together on some little sandbank in the river of time. And sandbanks in rivers are like very temporary things, aren't they? They easily get washed away. So how are we? This is, I note that this is the 21st century, and the 21st year of the 21st century is almost upon us. The 21st century comes of age. Isn't that modern? So is this where Western civilization hits its very peak of prosperity and power? Maybe. And you were there when it happened. So I'm just going back to when I was a kid. So that's more like the middle of the last century. Yeah. And I must say, when I was a kid, you know, the future did seem so futuristic. You know, what marvels would science come up with in the next century? You know, looking that far ahead, if you can imagine. You know, when I was born, they already had the atom bomb, and you know, just before I was born, the first 2 dogs went up into space. In the year before I was born, there were females and there were Russians. That's the year of the Sputnik. I bet nobody's heard of the Sputnik, who's a bit younger than me, but that was a popular word at the time. And you know, science fiction was like a popular type of literature at that time too, you know. And Superman comics that just come over from America seem to symbolize that very promise of, you know, this sort of, you know, technological world of science and progress that was, you know, looming for mankind, an exciting future. However, 20 years into the 21st century, maybe things look a bit different. What shall we say? The wheels are coming off the chariot? Well, that sandbank in the middle of the river there is sort of starting to shrink rather rapidly. Or the other one, the other idea I thought of was the ice flow, you know, the shrinking ice flow in the warming ocean of samsara. That seems like quite a relevant way to picture our situation here. Yeah, so it's just where we are. You know, what's our predicament? I mean, I think personally we're looking forward to the death of the civilization and the collapse of ecosystems all around the world, and then, you know, the extinction of so many species that we have to talk in terms of a mass extinction. So I think that's already an appropriate term. Will our species be included? Well, who knows? I'm not some sort of scientific expert, but I think a huge population crash is kind of inevitable. Humans are very ingenious creatures. And I've got no magic mirror for the future. I don't know what's going to happen, but I just think we should you know, take stock of where we are when we're talking about, you know, Buddha's deep efforts to guide us towards the truth and to sort of you know, a kind of a better place. Okay, so what's new in all this then? Well, actually, there isn't that much that's new, you know, like climate change being driven by the activity of one of the species on the planet. That's unusual. Climate change has not usually come about through the direct efforts of, you know, one of the species as part of the flourishing. It's come about more through, you know, more indirect effects like, you know, asteroid impact and, you know, volcanic activity, increases of CO2. Of course, you can say it's all the product of our own karma. You know, in the end, everything that happens to us is you know, what's coming back to us from you know, the karmic actions that we performed. However, this is the really direct result of our kind of, you know, sort of impact on you know, the sort of biological and atmospheric systems of the world. You know, it's that that's coming back in our face. We've done it to ourselves. So that's one thing. And then I think the speed at which the climate change is happening is really that's kind of quite new. It's never been so fast before in the history of the Earth, as far as I know. So it's, you know, that makes it all the more difficult to deal with, of course. Yeah. So Anyway, let's get on with the subject. So that's what I'm saying, that there isn't so much new in it, in the sense that climate change is climate change of the seriousness with which we face now. I don't know. We can't measure how serious this one is going to be. But climate change, creating mass extinctions of species, that's happened, five or so times in the history of the Earth already. The climate's always been changing. Yeah, and even in the time that man has been on Earth, which is 100,000 years, or well, in the last 100,000 years that man has been on Earth, then, the climate's often been very different from what it is now. And man has survived, but then it was colder, much colder. So the idea that this stable little kind of interlude we've had, where civilizations have grown and flourished, and the wisdom traditions of Buddhas have come into the Earth, that's only a very temporary, temporary little a sort of sandbank on the river of time, compared to, if you look back at the history of the Earth, and indeed the history of other races, not just other species. I mean, but other races of humans or quasi-humans, like the Neanderthals and the Denisovans. These are, human type species that evolved and passed away from the Earth, leaving us in charge. So, I mean, and look at the fossil record. Yeah, there's kind of like 90% of species that ever lived on this Earth have all passed away already. They're all extinct. They may have evolved into different species. I'm not saying they all crashed and went to nothing. Maybe they evolved and passed on their flourishing to descendants who were like better than they were. But it's still, that process of transformation is ceaseless, and we do well to remember it. And as for civilizations, the founding principle of civilization is the creation of walls. Somebody said to me, a friend of mine actually, the founding principle of civilization is the creation of walls to keep out unwelcome realities. And in time, they fall. So I think, they're crumbling now. So we are looking for our solutions to fulfillment in life with that as a background. That's what I'm saying. Even in Buddha's time, in his nation was more or less wiped out. His people, his clan, the Shakya clan, were more or less destroyed, not by climate change, but by the attack of a neighbor. So many of the friends and people he knew when he was a youth must have been killed and slaughtered. It was quite a genocide, something of that particular little kind of province somewhere up there in northern India. Yeah, so nothing new in the kind of the idea that everything that comes that looks good in samsara gets swallowed up by the great jaws of time. So that's the modern times. So what is this ancient wisdom of the Buddha? What's that got to do with problems like that and as big as that? Well, what can I say? We follow the Buddha's teachings. Actualize the meaning of the teachings in our lives. And if we can't do that, then we just have to lay down whatever imprints we can. So imprints, that brings in the idea of karma. So I'm trying to talk from the point of view of like complete beginners. So I'm not sure if everybody knows all about karmic imprints. But whatever we do comes back to us. Whatever happiness we experience in this world or suffering we experience in the world is kind of a kind of a reflection, a throwback to us of the kind of the harm or the goodness we put out. That's the theory of karma. So there's no God kind of creating everything and moving people around in the world according to his whim. And it's not happening by chance, because what does happen by chance? Very little, actually. So this is a brief mention of the topic of karma, which we can come back to if people are interested. But I want to talk a little bit now about Buddha's life, just to, we have a sort of this glimpse of the, this futuristic 21st century where, things are sliding into a bit of a less fortunate state than they have been. And Excuse me. Contrast that with Buddha's life. I must have swallowed a mosquito. Sorry. So if Buddha was born 556 years before the Common Era, that's nobody's quite sure, but that's somebody's estimation. In Nepal, well, what is now Nepal? He was brought up in Kapilavastu, which is a place you can visit on the tourist pilgrimage route. But there's two of them. There's one, the Indians say Kapilavastu is in India, like on the northern border of India with Nepal. And the Nepalese say, no, Kapilavastu was here in Nepal, on the Nepalese side of the border. So you got two contenders of where Buddha was brought up, the capital of this little kingdom that his father was king of. So there's a bit of competition there. When I was doing the pilgrimage round a few years ago, that hadn't been decided, who was right and who was wrong. So his father was King Shuddhadana and his mother, Queen Maya. Mother died pretty soon after he was born. He was brought up by his auntie, his mother's sister. And interesting, a prophecy that he was prophesied by soothsayers or astrologers, which are, common guests at introduction of a young baby to the world. They have to have his horoscope cast in India. And he was prophesied to be either he's going to be a great king, a great emperor maybe, or else he'd be a great world-renouncing religious leader. And guess which his father wanted him to be. His father was king of this, in charge of this district, or king of this little kingdom. So obviously, or not surprisingly anyway, his father really wanted him to be the next in line, and he really liked the idea of his son carrying on his good work and being expanding the kingdom and making everything really fantastic for his people. But just to be sure, he's very afraid that Buddha might get the idea that there's more to life than just the palace pleasures and luxuries and power. So they took the precaution of surrounding the palace gardens and the palace grounds with high walls, and kind of forbidding Buddha to go outside there. So everything inside should be all very beautiful, very handsome, no ugly looking servants, no old people, not anybody who was ever sick. The Buddha was not allowed to see them. He's just surrounded by pleasure opportunities and fun, because the king didn't want him to get the idea there might be something unsatisfactory about life, and therefore he might get a bit dissatisfied with his future as a king. Nevertheless, the king, the Buddha, in his younger time, before he becomes a Buddha, of course, he escapes from the palace to have a look round. He takes his charioteer. Charioteer disobeys orders, and eventually, slips out of the palace with him a few times, and they have these interesting encounters. So the first one is that they meet an old man, who's bent over on a stick and wrinkles on his face, and thinking, the Buddha says, oh, who on earth is that? Look at him, what's wrong with him? And the charioteer says, well, there's nothing wrong with him. He's just a bit old, that's all. But he's, as the Buddha says, oh, look, he's all wrinkled, and, he's bent over, and he's walking with a stick, and his hair's all white, and half of it's fallen out, What do you mean there's nothing wrong with him? Well, the charioteer says, well, he's old, of course, he's old, but, that's quite normal. So the Buddha says, what do you mean it's normal? Well, the charioteer says, well, everybody will get like that. That's all, we'll all come to that if we don't die before we get old. And the young prince says, what? You mean we're all going to end up like that? Sort of horrified at the prospect of being so kind of feeble. And the charioteer says, yes, that's what we've all got to look forward to. So the Buddha goes home very very perturbed, you know, very kind of sort of plunged in thought, as if I've got to become like that, you know. So then the next time they go out, as we probably all know, but it's a good story to tell, then he meets somebody who's sick, you know, and they're looking down from the chariot at this guy is lying on his little bed on the pavement outside his little, you know, his little house, and he's obviously, you know, very pale and sweating and all this and trembling. He's got some sort of malaria or TB or something, you know, some sort of very nasty disease. And the Buddha says, "Oh, look at him! That's another old man there." And the charioteer says, "Oh, he's not old." Well, and the Buddha says, "Well, look at him. He's like, oh, so feeble, you know, that just like that guy we saw yesterday, got feeble and obviously lacking in strength and going nowhere." But the charioteer says, no, he's not old. He's actually quite young. He's probably as young as me. But look, he's sick. And the Buddha says, "What do you mean sick?" And he says, "Well, you know, sometimes you get diseases, you know, sometimes, and we don't really know how it happens, but, you know, you get these fevers where you're trembling and sweating, and you don't know whether you're going to live or die, and you know, it's all this like, and that's just the way it is, your worship, your lordship." And the Buddha says, "Well, you know, you mean that can happen at any time, not just when you've lived for many years and you get old like that other chap we saw, but it happens at any time. You can get all this physical weakness and pain and suffering." And the charity says, yes, of course, sir. You know, I've had it many times, sir." And then the Buddha again goes home. He's so plunged in thought, you know, thinking, you know, it's all the, you know, contrasting that with the pleasures of his palace existence. And he says, "But I won't get like that, will I?" And the charity says, "Well, why not? You know, you're only human like everybody else, even though you are a prince, and get nice food to eat, but still it can happen." And then the next time they go, and they meet a dead person, don't they? So there's somebody being carried along the road to the cremation grounds. So they're wrapped in white, and 4 guys are carrying him, and there's a guy blowing a little trumpet going ahead in the front. And so the Buddha says, "Oh, look, there's somebody else who's sick there. Look, he's sick. And the charity says, "Your lordship, no, he's not sick, he's dead." And the Buddha says, What do you mean dead?" And he says, "Look, you only live for so long, don't you? And then you pass away." And it says, "What do you mean pass away?" So, "You stop living, you know, you go out of existence." And the Buddha says, "What?" And he says, "Yes, my dear wife, she only died last year. It was terrible, sir. It was a horrible fate, and I'm still very sad about it." And the Buddha says, "What? You mean and everybody is going to have to die like that?" And the charity says, yes, it's the fate of everybody. Everybody's born's got to die, sir. Everybody who's born's got to die. So the Buddha again is like, you know, says, "Well, you mean me too?" And I said, yes. Even kings and the sons of kings. So the Buddha is, you know, again is struck silent, and he's plunged in thought as he's, you know, taken back to the palace by the charioteer. So then the 4th time they go out, 4th and last time, they meet. This time they meet a wandering monk, somebody who's, you know, given up on family life, given up on, you know, the ordinary social life, given up on worldly pleasures, and is, you know, seeking the truth, seeking a spiritual way. And so this again gives Buddha, you know, a great deal of food for thought. So that there are people who are, you know, not just sort of living their life from day to day, seeking the satisfactions of, you know, material pleasures or, you know, family fulfillments of ordinary worldly life. And so that again gives Buddha a great deal to think about. And so, you know, the pleasures of the palace then, with you know, their musicians and entertainments and dancing shows and dancing girls, then more and more seem to the Buddha to seem rather tasteless, you know, rather dry and sort of fleeting and superficial. And you know, the affluence of palace life and the indulgence and the idleness and the pleasure seeking start to get on his nerves. So somehow, you know, remembering now his destiny, now he's reached maturity, he's gone through his birth, he's reached maturity, and he begins to think, you know, so is there some way to halt death, rebirth, and suffering? And yes, he leaves the palace determined to do just that. He doesn't have the permission of his parents, who obviously want him to, you know, follow on from them and be that great king that was prophesied. But he leaves them behind. He leaves all the pleasures behind. He leaves even his wife and son behind. In a way, he leaves behind the whole Shaka clan. You know, if he had become if he had become a king, if he had taken the world as his theatre of action and become a great king, a great warrior, then, you know, there's every reason to think, well, why wouldn't he be able to save the Shaka clan? He'd make the Shaka clan great. He'd make them, you know, far more powerful than any of their neighbors because of his abilities. But he didn't do that. Even if, you know, he had the foresight to see the future, you know, in the way the Mahayana Buddhists tell the Buddha story. He's kind of, you know, he knew what was going to happen anyway. So he could have foreseen that even the heavy punishment that his clan would come under, you know, the death and the slaughter, you know, because of a grudge of a neighboring king that wanted to punish them. Well, there's a long story, a different story, a very good story, and a true one apparently, but I'm not going to tell it now. But in when Buddha was over 70 years old, his people were wiped out, despite his best efforts to stop it, you know, as a religious leader. But had he been a political, you know, a royal king, then there's no reason to think even his own people could have been wiped out like that. But he had a destiny. He had a destiny, didn't he? He had a destiny to discover those spiritual truths which take you beyond, you know, the clutches of death and suffering and, you know, going around in cyclic existence. To find the light of wisdom, benefit all creatures, not just himself, not just him going to some sort of a nirvana or some sort of private nature, but something that would offer that lasted for, you know, the generations to come. And I think you can credit him with doing that, you know. So he did fulfill his destiny, even if he did have to leave behind his, you know, all his people and his wife and children and everything. And a magnificent achievement it was. Remember, in those days, you know, he'd be walking barefoot from village to village. He wouldn't be going around, you know, with the Zoom teachings and microphones and kind of, you know, people writing down every word he said, even writing it down, never mind recording it. So how are you supposed to spread a teaching around the whole world, or most of the world, all the continents, if, you know, you don't even have even if the teachings aren't even written down for 200 or 300 years after he died. And all he's doing is walking from village to village on foot, you know, barefoot probably, through the dust and the heat of India. And yet his message is resounded, his message has resounded through the centuries, up until the present day. So that's a remarkable fact in itself. So we can see in the Buddha's simplified story of the Buddha's, you know, renunciation, which is all I'm going to tell of the Buddha's story. I'm not going on into any more detail. But, you know, he's leaving behind, what should we say, family life, worldly life, even though he was born, you know, in the sort of, you know, in the palace. So he's leaving all that behind. You see, I mean, it's that's all I'm going to tell. But, you know, that's about confrontation with old age, sickness, death, rebirth. So all the other modern crises that we're talking about now, the passing away of a civilization, the passing away of ecosystems, and even the passing away of the human race, maybe. I don't know. They're all kind of included, you know, as the sufferings of samsara. So, you know, I think we can look at Buddha's teachings, you know, and just as they were relevant in his day, they're still relevant in our day to our problems. Yeah, so okay, temporary repairs, temporary relief of suffering. Yes, yes, of course, you know, and our Western civilization, you know, for certain privileged few of the you know, the Western white people and so on, and you know, ruling classes in other countries too, you know, it's been very favourable. We're very grateful. I'm very grateful for the doctors for temporary repairs. I can assure you of that. Very grateful. But you know, Buddha is he's out there to cut the root of all suffering. He's not a temporary repairman. He's like your, you know, radical guy who's going to cut the root of all suffering. He's looking for where it all arises from. I'm going to do something about it. Yeah, we've tried to do something about it, you know, in Western terms. You know, we've tinkered the material environment, often very successfully, but you know, all those clever kind of inventions and you know, machines and so on, they need power, don't they? They need kind of, you know, fuel. And where's the best source of fuel? You know, it's hydrocarbons. Just like our own bodies, you know, what's our fuel? It's carbohydrates, isn't it? It's the same atoms of carbon and hydrogen joined together. Who joins them together? Well, it's the plants, isn't it? Through photosynthesis. And that becomes food. We break those atoms of carbon and hydrogen back down again, and release of energy. We are fueled up. You know, that's the fuel we need to keep our bodies warm, and you know, to do all those chemical processes in our body, which, you know, keeps the body kind of replicating itself from moment to moment, to day, and all the fuel that our machines use, ever since beginning with the steam engine, is it's the same stuff, isn't it? It's only hydrocarbons. So, you know, it's the hydrocarbon sort of fuel cycle, whatever you want to call it. And so we're all working on that basis to kind of keep things going here. But in terms of our Western progress, you know, it's become, you know, with some sort of huge debt to pay now. We've got some sort of, you know, we've got a huge overdraft. You know, we've borrowed so much of the Earth's freely given, you know, resources that they're kind of just running out. So it's even if we are one of the privileged few of the privileged elites of you know, Western Europe or the white people or wherever it is, you know. So it's time is ticking on. Yeah. So Buddhism now is the inner turn, you see, not fiddling with the material environment so much. You know, much as we respect the scientists' efforts to make us comfortable, I'm very grateful to them. But Buddhism's, and you know, maybe Indian spirituality in general, Indian approach, not just Buddhism actually, is the inner turn. So that's you know, the mental aspect. It's you know, what can we do to find our peace through you know, training our minds. So that's where Buddhism comes in. So different approach, isn't it? A different approach. Yeah. So it's the basic sort of premise, or whatever it is, the basic difference between us and, say, a lot of Western thinkers. Not all of them, of course. You know, we have Christian philosophers as well, but you know, mind is not a material phenomenon. So mind isn't just some sort of offshoot of the brain. It isn't just something that dies when the brain dies. So it's kind of, you know, it's a sort of a substance or something like that. You can call it. It's a thing which functions. It's a process. It goes through all those transformations just like matter, but it's not made of atoms. And it's not made of physical energy like you say. Well, electricity is not made of atoms, but it's still a physical. It's in the physical, you know, matter energy spectrum. Mind is not, according to Buddhist analysis. So that gives mind, you know, some different prospects. It gives it some you know, different possibilities. And indeed, if things are going wrong in the world, it's the mind that's driving them wrong. Yeah? So it's not like the mind is not responsible for all the troubles in the world. It is, but you know, you have to speak of first, you know, of the mind's brilliant potential. So maybe I've talked too much about the, you know, the sort of unpleasant side of kind of life and looking at the future, and it's a bit disturbing, I know. And what's to be done about it? Well, in practical terms, I haven't seen anybody doing much, and I wouldn't know what to do myself. But not in sort of short-term rescue type of kind of approaches, but you know, long-term, you know, fundamentally. So what do we need to do? And the Buddha's solution is, you know, training your own mind, awakening the super potential, the brilliant potential of your own mind. So that's where the challenge lies. So I'm not in for this mechanical view of mind at all, you know, where, oh, humans are naturally aggressive because it's like wired into it's in the wiring of your computer that it does certain things. So it's in the wiring of the human, you know, mind. It's in the genes or something that humans will get aggressive when they're threatened or something, you know, as if there's no way out. It's like, you know, they are programmed responses, just like we see, you know, birds and, you know, sort of supposedly less intelligent animals. They were operating very much on kind of instinctive reactions. But, you know, I don't think that's the way the mind has to work. I don't think it has to be like that. And, okay, so what's Buddhist sort of description of the mind then? Well, the Buddhist sort of defining characteristics of mind: clear and knowing, clear and knowing, clear and knowing. Yeah, so clear, the mind's clear, so it's clear with what appears to it. So yeah, even if something mistaken is appearing to it, still it's clear to that mistaken appearance. So it's like a, that's kind of the first feature we can say about it, you know. It sort of takes on the impressions, it takes on yeah, it takes on the aspect, you know, it takes on the appearance of whatever's in front of it. And that's not just superficially. Of course, we can think quite deeply and use reasoning processes and kind of figure things out. It's not like we just doomed just to react to superficial appearances. But you know, that's one point. It's clear in its apprehension somehow, and then its knowing function. So knowing is a difficult word to describe. How do you describe what knowing is? You can give sort of you know, similar words like apprehending or experiencing or realizing, but you know, you're just using, you know, similar words without really getting to the point. But you know, I think we all have a functioning mind, so we can all experience knowing, even if we can't describe it so well. So this is you know, this is a stream of activity in the universe, which is sort of kind of at least there. sort of alongside the material stream of activity in the universe. Maybe it's even more fundamental. So that the mind isn't sort of just limited to anything that the body can produce. Of course, there's intimate interactions between body and mind, but then there's the survival of the mind after death. That's definitely in the Tibetan tradition. They talk about that a lot. Rebirth, mind goes on until enlightenment. In other forms of Buddhism, maybe they don't stress things like that. They want to live in the moment, and it's not like so much kind of a discussion of rebirth, but definitely in the Tibetan tradition of Buddhism, which I'm trying to give a flavor of, it's something to think about, and plenty of good reasons why to think like that. Yeah, so the body dies, but the mind goes on. I'll just say, well, I think there are plenty of cases now, in the literature of serious research has been done to show that there are children who remember their past lives, and not just people in some sort of special religious tradition like the Tibetan tradition. Cases in the West, cases have been researched by people with degrees or professorships in psychology in Western universities, and they've come up with a body of evidence which most people try to are quite happy to ignore because it doesn't fit into their paradigm about our basic assumption is that the mind is a material phenomena, just some sort of outflow of the brain or something. But I don't think that's the whole story. That there's a lot of evidence to say that the mind does survive death, and then from after death there's rebirth, and there's people then the occasional odd people, the few who do remember their past lives, and their experiences are verified by research, and is what they're saying about their past life. Can it be followed up and found out whether it's true or not? Going back to the place where they say they were born, or doing that kind of analysis of the evidence, and working like a historian or a lawyer or something to weigh the claims and say, is this something that the child is remembering that he could not possibly have learnt in any other way except through his own memories. He's never been prompted by anybody to tell a story to deceive anybody, and so on. So all those techniques that lawyers and so forth would use to evaluate evidence. So you get quite a striking kind of presentation there. So that's the first thing I'd like to say about the mind. And so then where's our mind coming from? Well, just as it's sort of potentially there throughout the future, then beginningless, like the universe is beginningless. So a stream coming from whenever, then taking rebirth, plowing again and again into samsara, experiencing suffering again and again, and going on. But going on to Buddhahood, maybe, you see. So it's not like we're just lost and wandering, and there's nothing we can do about it. It's coming from beginningless time in an endless series, coming from beginningless time in a series. So your mind is like co-infinite with the universe, it seems to me, whether you're talking about time or space. Here now we are confined within one body. That's all right, yeah. The way being born as a bird, you have to think like a bird, you have to act like a bird, and that's your dharma, your fate for that life, isn't it? Born as a human, you're going to think like a human. You're going to be constrained. The gravity is pulling your body down, so you're going to be in that body and kind of localized in time and space. But is that how it's got to be? I don't see it's got to be like that at all. And I think Buddhahood, if you look at the some sort of descriptions of Buddhahood, it's like you're free of all those constraints. So that catches my imagination. So the mind, trainable, it's very curious, and especially the human mind. This is the the perfection of the human rebirth, you know, we can be trainable, we can be curious, and we can satisfy our curiosity, we can inquire, you know, and then we can transform our mind, you know, from being ignorant to being, you know, very sensible, from being, you know, emotionally disturbed to being emotionally calm. These transformations take place and they have to be worked for. You know, it's not like they just come just because you believe in Buddha as a wonderful teacher. You have to train your mind. You have to do meditation. You have to understand where you're heading for and know how to get there. And then, you know, train your mind to do that. Stop being fooled by your own kind of a desirous attachment or your own sort of irritation, anger, your own negative emotions. You know, to see that they're all kind of, you know, just leading you into unhappiness and suffering. So, I mean, looking ahead to like to the complete Buddhahood, then, you know, not sort of practical step by step, you know, ways of finding peace of mind and day-to-day calmness and equanimity, which are all very, you know, all very possible and all very, you know, sort of Buddhism will lead us in those directions for practical day-to-day benefit. But looking ahead right completely to the ultimate enlightenment, you know. So what would that be like? Well, it's sort of insisting that the mind is completely pure in its potential. You know, it's not like there's something like some sort of toxin there or some impurity or some sort of, you know, defeating kind of ignorance or dullness in the mind that is always going to be there, you know. No matter how much you polish it, it's never going to shine. So why on earth should the mind be like that? You know, it's far. It's just as easy to believe, surely, that, you know, the mind is completely pure, and that these defilements, yes, there's very many terrible kind of addictions and kind of oppressions and kind of, you know, sort of sticking places and obscurations in the mind. Very, very many, and they're very deep in some cases. But it doesn't mean they can't all be got rid of. They're all adventitious. That's the word that you keep hearing in Buddhist circles. All your defilements are adventitious. Adventitious, it means that they are there due to circumstances. It's not like the mind is naturally like that. But you are, you know, those defilements or kind of, you know, negative ways of reacting to problems through getting, you know, or sorry for yourself, or, you know, getting defeated by circumstances, you know, or getting angry with people, or getting afraid, or, you know, or sort of having desire for material objects which aren't really going to satisfy your, you know, your craving for happiness, but you grasp after them anyway, you know, because it's a fashion or something. You know, all those sort of, you know, clumsy attempts of the mind to find happiness. It's sort of, you know, it's not like the mind has to be like that. The mind has like a total kind of luminosity, you know, sheer luminosity, a sheer pureness, a sheer knowingness that is, you know, can get to the truth. So you're knowing what's actually there, not being fooled by the mirrors of your, you know, confusion and illusion. So that's what I'm to try would try to boost everybody with, that would listen. You know, those faults of the mind, they can all be eradicated. Yeah, so I think, you know, Buddha's, this idea we are localized in space and time, just, you know, here in this body, in this place, in this time, at this point in history. I think for a Buddha, that must all disappear. So that his mind expands to the size of the universe, both in physical dimension and throughout time. He's present in all moments. So then our mind has got that same potential. We are potential Buddhas. It's not like he was some special son of God or something, that he had the, you know, the special kind of lineage to become a Buddha, and we don't. I think we all have that possibility. We all have the potential. So then you have, you know, this development of wisdom beyond all hang-ups. So how does that come into being? Well, yes, good question. Well, let me say something about selflessness, but I feel I should stop now. Ask for some questions. I don't want to be too go on for too long. But yeah, so I think, if somebody asks me to prove that about all this about what you're saying about the mind, how can you convince us? How can you really show us that the mind has such bright possibilities? It all sounds very good, but where do you go for kind of confidence that is actually the case and not just some wishful thinking? Well, I don't know. You have to try out Buddhism. You have to try out meditation. You have to try on a simple level. If you find that Buddhist meditations and teachings you can help you on a sort of a smaller scale, how not to get angry so often, or not, how not to lose confidence so often, or not to be just a victim of circumstances. You can keep your equanimity even when you should be panicking if you were like your old self, but now you know how to control your panic and be more, take things at a bit more simpler level, take it as a joke instead of, a nasty word that's supposed to get you upset. So all that kind of stuff, when you see that your mind is being helped on that level by teachings, I think you can have confidence, you build up your confidence that then the deeper things that Buddha's teaching about how to really, revolutionize your way of understanding things through this view of selflessness, emptiness, then, you get kind of, start to get intrigued by that, and you start to get, yes, well, maybe that even that possibility is there, when you see the positive effect that Buddhism can have in leading you sort of to a kind of a better state of mind, bit by bit. But yes, the really radical teaching of the Buddha is teaching about emptiness. So, how do we really exist? What is our ultimate way of being? I mean, have you ever asked yourself that question? I mean, it's a challenging question to ask, and how would you ever answer it? But Buddha answered that question. When we ask, what is our mode of being? What is there? Like, what in reality? Well, it's an intriguing question. Like, and the answer, Buddha's answer is like thinking about dependent arising. Everything that happens in this world is arising through independence upon other phenomena. It's arising in dependence upon, for instance, causes. Effects arise from causes. I mean, that's not news to anybody who's studied any branch of knowledge. Every effect has to arise from a cause. Like an omelette is going to arise from raw eggs. But there's more to the teaching than just simple understanding of that kind of knowledge that a cook or a farmer has. But dependent arising, the implications of that, when you take them to their furthest point, is nothing has any reality of its own whatsoever, by its own power. So whether we're talking about depending on causes, depending on parts, depending on interpretation by the mind, so all these are aspects of dependent arising. So when you take those to their fullest extent, then you get a sense of emptiness, a sense of selflessness. There is nothing there from the object's own side. There's nothing there from my own side. So Buddha's teaching on selflessness as emptiness is very profound, very intriguing, very liberating. I can't say I've understood hardly anything about it, but it's kept me intrigued for all those many years that I've been studying Buddhism now. So this, I think, when you get to penetrate that teaching a little bit, then you really sort of start to wonder, that maybe Buddhism has, really got some very profound answers, which will, even serve to deal with the large crises that are looming in our life and times. I'm not saying that this is the way to get rid of the problems, like just with a snap of the fingers. But what I'm saying is that, you can live through them, and always have something to hang on to, some principles of solid understanding, like compassion and, kindness to others and patience and, coming out the other side, even if it's many lifetimes, many lifetimes when there's hardly, the word of wisdom will never be heard on the earth, because there are creatures, all the creatures who are highly evolved enough to think about wisdom, there's no place for them on the earth, because it's become a place that, sort of highly evolved creatures like that can't live on anymore. But still, in the future, sometime down the line, whether it's many, many lifetimes, Buddha didn't get enlightened in one lifetime. He became enlightened through many lifetimes of practice. So, we have to lay down whatever imprints we can. Anyway, I'm going to stop talking there. That's enough. And let's have a few questions, if there are any. Jason.
Yeah, we've got plenty of questions coming through. So we've got this upvote function. So I'm going to ask the ones that have been upvoted the most, and maybe pick one or two out that seem interesting. So we've got someone called Jen, and she's asking, so going back to karma, is it determinism? Is it fate? Or is it something else?
Karma, yeah. Well, people often come up with karma, but that means that, you got no free will or something, but that's not the point, no. And we can talk about the hand of cards and then how you play it. Yeah. So through your karmic deed, one karmic deed or another, you get born as a human or something with a fantastic chance to follow a wisdom tradition like Dalai Lama or Buddhism or something. Or you come out from, you do some negative karmic action in some previous life, and you get reborn as a creature with a much lower kind of level of, possibilities, like an earthworm or something. So that's the ripening up of a karma, the previous action you did in a previous life, whether it was a positive action which gets you a favorable rebirth, a negative action which gets you in a sort of an animal rebirth, which is a little bit down the scale, or even worse, where suffering is quite intense, all the time. So that's a ripening up, of what you did in the past. So like that's kind of, you haven't got much choice about that. I mean, you try to make sure a good karma ripens up at death time by, doing sort of living a wholesome life and having a virtuous cast of mind. But then, having been born human, having had your birth here, then you've got a lot of freedom of choice, haven't you? Whether what you do with your life is then kind of up to you. So you've got the hand of cards. May not be as good as some other people's hand. It may be a lot better than other people's. Then you've got to play it. So the karma doesn't take away, your free choice and free will. It just, it's just part of the mix.
Okay, great. So the other question that's come up, that's got one of the most votes, is how can we trust that there actually is enlightenment? So I guess how can we prove it's possible?
Yes, well, I was thinking, sort of trying to answer that question a bit with my talk about emptiness, but it's once you get started on that subject, you get into, it gets a bit long-winded maybe for a talk like this one tonight, more for the beginner end of the spectrum. Yes, I think if you realize emptiness and you realize the way that things appear to us right now, through our overlay of ignorance, which is misinterpreting things, making them appear in the way they don't exist, compulsively, not just because we're lazy or anything. It's like that's some sort of a deep conditioning from previous lives, you see. So this ignorance we're talking about is quite a deep phenomenon. So very hard to counter. But then, if you do overcome that and break through to a realization of emptiness, you must see how things are so much more, different, and so much more mind dependent, and so much more, possibilities of mental kind of transformation, and going quite beyond just the surface level of life which we live at the moment, and we seems to be, that's all there is. So I think a realization of emptiness, that there's nothing there from the object's own side. there's nothing there. You don't exist by way of your own power whatsoever. You have no own reality that's from within you. You know, everything is merely a kind of a build-up of sort of causes, parts, and then mental interpretation, the way you come at it with your own mind. So it's a fascinating subject. So when you see that in view of all those, independently arisen connections that you have, then there is nothing that is there by way of its own, inherent nature, and meditate on that, then that's really purifying the mind, really getting rid of all those defilements and confusions that I'm talking about. And then you sort of will feel that, enlightenment looks possible at that point, I would have thought. So, that's one way of going.
Thanks. So there's another question here. So you kind of touched on this briefly. So if we do not learn from karma, do we have a similar rebirth in our next life?
If we don't learn from karma?
I guess if we don't learn from our mistakes or something.
Yes. If we go back to the beginning, like karma is, emptiness is some sort of bit more deeper kind of study, isn't it? But if you are trying to sort of encourage people like who've got a, more of a beginner's level approach, then the first, method of finding more promise of happiness in your life is avoiding actions which harm others, avoiding negative actions, and then, refraining from hurting others, and then if possible, actively, helping them and doing the virtuous actions of the kind where you're not just refraining from hurting people, but seeing whatever you can do to help them. And so then, you're reversing away from all the negative karma, that trip, and you're filling your mind with more virtuous thoughts and kind of, kindness to others is more in your mind. And so just by doing that, you'll kind of tend to kind of enhance the possibilities of happiness in the future, whether it is in this life or in future lives. So yeah, you have to take control of the situation. And in terms of karma, the best thing is stop doing negative actions, and make sure you do positive ones as much as possible. And then there are methods of purification. Negative actions have already done don't have to be quite so dangerous in your mind, as ripening up into unpleasant rebirths or suffering. So you have to know how to purify those negativities. Make your mind clean it up a bit. So yeah, purification is also part of your sensible approach to making karma work for you, instead of making you fall into trouble.
So there's a few questions that kind of have an equal amount. There's a couple of interesting ones, but I'll quickly ask this one, which has just had a few votes last minute. Are there any key fundamental principles to live your life as, if you're a Buddhist? What are the key principles to live your life as a Buddhist?
So what key principles?
Key principles to live your life as a Buddhist.
Key principles, yeah. Well, I'm more for I like to keep in mind myself the three principal aspects of the path. Maybe other people come with a quite different idea about what the key principles will be, but my idea is renunciation. Just like the Buddha lived in the palace and had all those luxuries and sort of worldly possibilities, but he said, yes, that's okay, but isn't there more to it than that? And so he moved away from that kind of just looking for places in this world, in this life. Obviously we need this sort of relaxation and kind of fun. It's not like being serious all the time. And when I was a monk amongst the Tibetans, you know, they're very, very good-humoured and sort of, you know, easygoing people, Tibetans. So they really knew how to be, like, you know, happy and sort of not sort of all serious and, oh, I'm a renounced sort of person, I can't smile, not like that. But, you know, don't take the pleasures of the world too seriously. That's renunciation. And the next one is the next to the three principal aspects of the path that we can talk about is compassion. So always, in all your dealings, think how much, you know, how much benefit there is for others and for yourself in, you know, trying to lift the sufferings of people's backs. So that's yes, you refrain from doing negative actions. You refrain from harming. You refrain from killing. You know, you refrain from eating meat. And you refrain from stealing. You refrain from the obvious negative actions. But then, you know, you work to make yourself understand how much your, you know, good fortune in this life depends on other people. Obviously, your parents and people like that, so they deserve your highest, you know, kindness and care and stuff like that. But if you really think about it, how many people have contributed to your happiness in this life? Innumerable, and not just people, creatures, you know. How many creatures have given up their lives for you to be able to eat the food you enjoy? How many creatures have given up their lives, you know, to produce in the production of all the material facilities and material, you know, objects that you make use of without thinking every day. And that's just thinking about this life. But in the past life, how many times have there been creatures, you know, sort of, you know, losing their lives in order that you can have your whatever it is, food or, you know, material resources or health in a previous life? You know, how many mothers have you had in previous lives? There's one mother in this life, but in all those previous lives, you've had so many mothers too. And where are they now? Well, they're wandering around the world in a different body, but still they were your mother in a previous life. So there's many ways, and you think how you're surrounded by people who, in fact, you know, have been very kind to you. And even if they shout at you and get angry and cross at you and hurt you in one situation, you can still think, well, in the past, in a previous life or something like that, they were still very kind to me. So they can lessen the kind of, you know, bitterness you feel to somebody just from one single incident in one particular life. Yeah, so anyway, that's compassion, you know, thinking about how to help other people through their suffering. You know, that's what better thing can we be doing with our life than you know, trying to persuade ourselves and getting involved with you know, other living creatures we share this planet with, you know, that level. And then the other one is emptiness. Yeah, so three principal aspects: renunciation, compassion, and emptiness. So emptiness is, you know, the actually there's nothing when you try to grasp it yourself. You know, I'm so important. I must have this. That person's insulted me. You know. You know, that's so beautiful. I must have that object, you know, I must have that pleasure object because I need it. All this sort of, you know, I focus of grasping at a sort of a self, when you realize selflessness and you can give up on that, you know, so always working, you know, to remember things are selfless and empty. But that's a, you know, bit of a more, as I say, a bit of a more sort of teaching it needs a bit more study to understand. But yes, that's another principle anyway.
Great. So I've got a couple of questions that are getting similar votes. So I'm just going to kind of combine these because I think they kind of are connected. So one question is the mind and the soul, is mind the same as soul in Tibetan Buddhism? And then I guess because you was talking about rebirth a lot and how to think about, you know, other beings as our mothers or something like that, how important is it really to believe in other lives? And should it change how we conduct ourselves if we don't believe in these other lives?
So the first one's about the soul, right?
Yeah, it's the mind.
So if we've been brought up in certain religions, not just a Christian religion, you might think mind, body, soul is a third force. But that's explicitly sort of argued against in Buddhist teachings. So mind and body, just think of yourself as a kind of, something which involves the collection of a mind and body, and don't think of a third force. If you want to say, well, what goes to the next life, or what would go to Buddhahood, what would go to Nirvana, then you just say it's your mind, right? So you don't have to have something else separate from your body and mind going to Nirvana. And no self separate from your body and mind. The self is just, what happens when the body and mind get together, and the self comes up. It's not like something extra to the mind and body. It's not like an extra soul. So you have to get rid of those extra ideas and say, you take away the mind and the body, and then there's no self there. There's no self, there's no soul, there's nothing left. All you are is just mind and body come together, and then you take that to be you. So, yeah, soul isn't sort of argued for in some Indian traditions, but not Buddhism. So Buddhism has, they're kind of arguing against these other Hindu or Indian traditions that are proposing there is a soul or a self with a capital S. Now, what was the other one about? Can you get by in life without worrying about your future lives or something?
Yeah. So how important is it to consider that in our daily lives if we don't believe in rebirth, for example?
Yeah. Well, fine. I mean, there's nobody has to kind of believe all these difficult things. Just if they find it difficult, that's fine. That's it's a bit of a hidden type of phenomena. So you can get a lot of people spend the time being very good, very sort of human and kind and sort of good citizens, shall we say, and working for the benefit of whatever, without believing in future lives. So it's not like to be loving and kind to others, you have to believe in future lives or past lives. No, you can be, and really kindness is like that may be the most important thing. Yeah? So it's not like you have to believe in future lives to be a kind person. And if being kind is the most important thing, really being compassionate, then, believing in past and future lives isn't so important. But it is, to me, I never thought it would be an easy thing to accept and think, oh, well, that's how things are. But when I studied some of the, good evidence for past lives and future lives, then it became quite convincing and quite a reasonable thing to accept. But yeah, it's not for everybody. Somebody who's got biases in other directions, and they don't have to accept that to live their lives well at all.
I've got a question here. Can we believe in God as well as Buddha?
Buddha is God, isn't it? Yeah, so Buddha's a divine being, and why not? He's gone so far beyond human level that he can be divine, but he's not the God who decides what everything's going to happen. That's karma, and that's working of cause and effect. Without a creator God, a supreme God says you're going to be punished because you've done that, and you're going to go to heaven because you've done that, and I'm the one who's going to put you there. Type of hands-on type of God. So that seems to be incompatible with Buddhism, as I understand it. It's like they talk about it being a non-theistic religion. But yeah, there's plenty of marvelous beings who are right up there beyond the, who've evolved beyond the human level, I say, and they can be called gods. Why not? I've got a question here from one of the audience, one of the live audience. I'm just going to take that question. Is that okay, Jason? Just before we...
Sure, yeah.
Further?
Of course.
Okay.
Yeah.
So you had a question?
Yes. You said earlier that everything is interdependent.
Yes.
Which means that all phenomena rise, remain for a while, and then disappear. No? So there is an intuitive sense of presence, of beingness here, that it remains unaffected and unchanging, but all these phenomena. So by abiding in this sense of presence, let's say, can the compulsive behavior that creates suffering be released and detached?
I'm not quite sure where your question was leading. So things arise from cause and conditions, and arise, and you know, a dependent arising. So then they arise, last for a while, and pass away. But then there's a sense of, you know,
Beingness.
Continuity.
You mentioned it earlier that there's also a sense of beingness, that it's alive constantly and unchanging here. I mean, like the sense of I am, the sense of I exist.
Well, I wouldn't necessarily say that's unchanging, but there is a sense of that, yeah.
So the question is, by abiding in this
Presence, yeah.
presence, let's say, can this compulsive behavior that creates suffering be diminished?
Yeah, so the I don't know if you heard what was said there, did you, Jason? By the questioner.
Best to repeat it, yeah.
Yeah. Well, he's saying that I've talked about dependent arising, which must mean depending on causes. And so there's arising, lasting, and passing away of things, of us and other phenomena, I guess. But in spite of that, there's a sense of something abiding. You know, our being is always present, our life, you know, we feel alive. So there's a sense of us continuing or something. Yeah, and so that's some sort of, you know, sense that we are continually here. But then does that sense of presence lead us into compulsive behavior? Do we get carried away by wrong emotions at that point? Is that
can bring
Oh,
freedom
no.
from the compulsive behavior?
Oh yeah, but sorry, I'm misinterpreting what he said. So can this sense of presence and being alive to your, you know, presence, can that help you, lead you away from compulsive behavior? Well, the more you're aware of reality, whether you're aware of impermanence, then that will lead you away from compulsive behavior. If you remember how impermanent and fragile and transient everything is, I think much more likely to get, much less likely to get angry with people, to get upset. You know, say, well, there's no time for that. You know, life is so short, and these feelings of anger that arise in people, they're also very impermanent. So the guy's angry with me, you know, it's like, how unpleasant, but you know, he's only angry for a moment and his anger passes away. Yeah, so the closer you are to reality, of the truth of what's happening, then I think the less you're going to be carried away by these afflictive emotions. And if you're very much in the present, just aware of what's going on, and you know, just mindful of that. And I think even that itself, that will also help you to not have these afflictive emotions arising. You know, 'cause you were just looking at the situation like kind of without any passion, like, you know, dispassionately, like just objectively. Yes, this is happening, that's happening, without immediately reacting with some, you know, compulsive reaction. But you're just sort of assessing the situation in a more mature way, like a more attentive way. So I think that would be a good method to reduce your afflictive emotions too. You know, just have a second thought and a third thought before you, you know, let your emotions carry you away.
So we're nearly at 90 minutes now.
Yeah.
I'm going to ask, you know, any closing remarks from yourself about Buddhism, and then I'm going to hand over back to Jill, who will say some closing remarks about Lamrim. Yes,
well, I'm sorry I've been coughing so much. There's something really dry in my throat. I don't know why. If it's a mosquito, I should have swallowed it by now. but it's still tickling. Sorry about that. I'm not usually coughing so much. Yeah, well, I mean, I think I've thought a lot about this, the hydrocarbon cycle that we're all going through, whether it's our own bodies or, the vegetable world, the botanical world, the world of plants, where these hydrocarbons are produced from the power of the sun in photosynthesis, which is the basis of the food chain, the chlorophyll making, edible things so that plants and so that animals and, humans can have things to eat, insects, and so the whole natural world can flourish from this hydrocarbon cycle, and one creature eating another, as predator and prey. They're only eating creatures which have eaten the carbohydrates, which are the base of the food chain, the plant carbohydrates, and the fossil fuels we're digging out of the ground are burning there again in the end. It's just the same, process of burning hydrocarbons and oxidizing hydrocarbons. So that's it seems to be like one of the real features of our kind of samsara in this world. Maybe it's different in other worlds, probably is. But in our world, it's like that, we're trapped. We must have fuel. So how do we get fuel? Well, we've got to burn something. Whether we're burning it inside our own bodies like ordinary animals, or we burn it outside, with the hunter-gatherers and the campfires, all the way up to, burning the whole world down now, because the climate's got so messed up that there's forest fires all over the place, people burning the Amazon down. Yeah, so all I'm saying is that I hope, and from my researchers, that maybe we can have an alternative to that. And all I'm saying is, get rid of all that ignorance, grasping at self, all that selfishness. And then when we get to Buddhahood, what is going to be our fuel, So maybe it's love is going to be the fuel. So that's my little hope, my thought to leave you with. Maybe love turns out to be the ultimate alternative clean fuel, the one the Buddhas run on. Thank you. Good night.
Thank you, Geshe Graham. That was probably the quickest 90 minutes that I've experienced for quite a while. So I think that just shows how engaging and how stimulating your talk has been. And I think having the questions, and thank you, Jason, for fielding those and sharing those. And thank you to everyone who participated with those questions, because I think that was really, really valuable and gave you all an opportunity to ask things that you wanted to ask, and for Geshe Graham to respond in that way. I think we've covered quite a range of principles, topics, concepts throughout the talk. So again, thank you, Geshe Graham, for that. I love what you've just said at the end there about love being the alternative fuel. And I'd already sort of noted that really the whole theme with Buddhism and what you've said is about loving kindness, just being kind, being compassionate, trying to lose our own sense of self and selfishness and be selfless. And it's just beautiful to be here this evening with you and for you to remind us of that. So just thank you from the bottom of our hearts for being here and sharing your teachings and your wisdom and your knowledge with us. And that's not all that we'll be seeing of Geshe Graham, which is wonderful. So I am thrilled to announce the next dates. We'd already said that we would be following through with our programme, and our next session with Geshe Graham will be an introduction to Lam Rim, because obviously we are a Lam Rim tradition at Lam Rim, Wales, and Geshe Graham will be talking us through that and what that actually means as one of the many different lineages and traditions of Tibetan Buddhism. So that date for your diaries, again, it's a Sunday and it's the 16th of August. And the same time, I think, if you want to make any comments about the time, whether this is suitable, obviously we can never please everybody all of the time, but it'll be good to get an indication of whether this time was suitable for all those that have managed to attend, or if you prefer a different time of the day. But other than that, 16th of August, Introduction to Buddhism, Introduction to Lamrim, sorry. And then our next date will be the 20th of September. And there we'll be having a more in-depth teaching from Geshe Graham. And the topic yet is to be confirmed. So we will let you know about that. So as I said, if you're not on the mailing list, please let us know if you'd like to be, and we can add you on there. It has been wonderful to connect with you all again. Obviously, we're very sad that the Lamrim Centre is closed due to the COVID-19 situation, as so many other facilities and businesses are. But we do hope to be open as soon as we are allowed to be, and as soon as we can get everything ready to reopen physically. So just rest assured that that's very much in our plans and has been all of the time to get the centre physically back open. But just to say, this is wonderful, and I think really everyone's learned so much about being able to host online teachings. And the positive side of that is that, of course, we've been able to reach so many people in much wider geographical area than we would have done if it was a physical teaching. So there are always positives to be had, and we're celebrating those this evening. So thank you once again to all of you that have attended. Thank you to Jason, who has not only helped with hosting this evening, but has been a huge help in working with us and setting up the programme with Geshe Graham. And just finally, thank you once again, Geshe Graham, for being such a wonderful teacher and sharing that with us this evening. Thank you.
Good night.
Good night. Good night, everyone. Thank you very much.